guest on Vinyl and Vision.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 79. Today's very special guest is Jesse Matthewson. Jesse is the lead singer and guitarist for the band Ken Mode, headliners at No Coast Fest on the final day of the fest on Sunday. Ken Mode is a pretty amazing band. They've been around for a very long time. Jesse and I discuss exactly how long and how many records they have out that exist. And I found it to be incredibly insightful conversation into a little bit of like what Ken Mode is doing right now as far as the new record being released. It's coming out on Friday, September 23rd. That's this Friday if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out. And they have other big plans. Tour is scheduled, and as Jesse had told me in the conversation, it actually revolved around the No Coast Fest. So it'd be a kind of a Midwest jaunt back up through the East Coast tour. You can visit their website. I will supply links to their website in the show notes to find that information and go out to see them if they're coming anywhere near you. Don't want to keep it too long here, folks. I just want to say thank you again for listening. If you enjoy our Noise Rock series, this is the fourth episode of the series so far. A couple more to go. I thank you very much for tuning in, and we just ask that you do all the things you do with the internet. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, rate, review, all of those things. It really helps us out, and we really do thank you. And enjoy. So how are you doing?
Oh, doing about as okay as I can be, I guess. How about yourself?
Doing okay. Keeping busy, which is pretty good. I like being busy.
I just wish it would slow down a little.
Oh, really? What's going on, man? I mean, you got the new record coming out. I imagine, is that what's causing all the commotion?
Yeah, quite honestly. The last time we put out a record, I think my brother and my other company was maybe a little less busy. Either that or we're getting more press this time. I just feel like there's way more things that I'm juggling right now, and I feel like I'm drowning.
Wow. Okay. Well, you know what? I won't take up too much of your time. We'll make this.
Oh, no. That's all good. I have this all scheduled. It's just, it's been a lot. A lot. I've been lamenting lately that like the thing that keeps my brain feeling okay is writing music, and I haven't been able to do that in a year, just because I've been dealing with like all the things that go behind a record cycle. Like creating videos, making sure that tours are being booked, dealing with all the press and promotions. And like, I like to micromanage that stuff. And I know maybe smarter artists wouldn't necessarily do that.
Well, I mean, it must be a thing about yourself. You kind of like to kind of keep control and run a tight ship, right?
Oh, very much so. And I mean, like that is part of what my day job is. Shane and I run a company that provides business services and business management for bands. So it's like, if I'm not doing the thing for my own band, what the hell am I doing? Right?
Right. No, I heard about that. What is it? MKM, is it?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and it's accounting of some sort, correct?
Yeah, it's basically like full-scale business management for like more popular artists than ourselves. But I guess the main driver is accounting and tax and all that boring stuff, because that is essentially the nuts and bolts of what business management is for anyone, right? Like if we were dealing with larger artists, you could get into all the other like facets that make like a regular corporation kind of deal. But like we're working within our community, so it's for the most part like it's just like running any other small business where you try and instill some of the skills in the band members themselves to take care of as much as they can, so they're not just paying you to do everything, because in most cases like they can't afford to pay for someone to do absolutely everything for them, and it makes sense for them to do some of it. But obviously like accounting and tax and stuff like that, you want a professional doing that.
Yeah, I don't do my own. I rely on a professional. But
I rely on my brother.
You do it for each other?
Yeah. Well, he's the chartered accountant, so he does like the technical work, and I do a lot of the other stuff, like especially with Canadian bands. There are a lot of granting programs, and I deal with a lot of that, trying to navigate bringing in as much money for our clients as we can, given the situation in this country. So
Right. I mean, and that brings up an interesting point because I mean, I know I'm not in a band right now, but I have been in the past, and being in a band is difficult because there's never any money. Like you can't make
Yeah,
money, and the little money that you do make on the road or from sales of records and merchandise, I mean, you want to hold on to as much as that as possible. And so you
yeah,
make a good point where it's just like, well, hey, anything that you don't have to pay out for that you can do your own, by all means, you really should because it's like a nickel and dime business for a band.
yeah, big time. The funny
Right.
One of the funniest skills that I think a lot of people take for granted, especially in the context of arts, is that so much of your job within this world and this industry is relationship management. And I
Mm.
think a lot of people take that for granted because a lot of the bands that like quote make it and are able to turn into this machine, it's because they've mastered that side of it. Because that is the hardest part in dealing
Mm.
with any kind of touring situation is being able to manage your interpersonal relationships, which I feel like the entertainment industry doesn't get enough credit with a lot of that because like what people end up doing is they're essentially running like their own HR department within their own companies, but because they didn't get a college degree for it, they don't get any credit, right? Like that's not something
Right.
anyone in the music industry considers something that they can put on their resume, even though they do it better than most people in corporate jobs. It's
Sure.
just
Yeah.
it's funny the mental disconnect that I find so many people in this walk of industry. Like they just it's very self-deprecating and it
Mm.
does require a whole lot of skills to keep these things moving. Like
Right.
even down to people who put on shows like, you know how much event planners get paid in the corporate world?
No, I don't.
Huge swaths of money.
Yeah.
And like anyone who runs a show gets treated like a scumbag. Like granted some of them are, but
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it takes all kinds. I mean, there's positives and negatives in all fields. There's good and bad, but yeah, I mean, it's very interesting the whole money aspect behind the music biz because as artists, no one really thinks about that because we're just like, well, I want to make art and I don't care what it costs or whatever as long as I have enough to pay to make my record and I have enough to hit the road and be out there. That's all I really care about. And then in the meantime, you could pretty much be taking a bath
yeah.
coming off the road every time, right?
And the unfortunate nature of it is it's a very predatory industry too. So
Right,
if
right,
you don't care about that stuff, someone sure is willing to pick up the slack
right.
and all
Yeah,
the pennies that come with it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're doing the business then. It sounds like you're doing God's work then. Taking care of
Yeah.
your clients.
At least in theory. I mean, we try to do the thing from a punk rock perspective, and I think the people that we do work with really appreciate that because I mean, it's when your accountant has slept on floors for 10 years doing the thing.
Mm,
That's the kind of credibility that I don't think you can say about any other accountant in this industry.
yeah, I bet. I can
They
imagine.
all like to play cool, but how many of them have actually slept on people's floors to save money
Oh yeah.
while doing the thing?
Right.
So, anyway,
Yeah,
not to
no.
toot our own horn here too
No
much,
no
but
one else has walked the walk quite as well as you have.
or as stubbornly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, I mean, let's get into that. I kind of wanted to get into, how you even kind of came to be where you are as far as being in the band Ken Mode is concerned. Um, Growing up, like, did you grow up in Winnipeg?
We did, yep.
Born and
Um,
raised.
my brother and I have been here through thick and thin. And honestly, as much as it provides barriers to entry in this industry, it also, as the cost of living has increased dramatically over the
Hmm.
last, what, 25, 30 years, Winnipeg has remained, all things considered, relatively cheap compared to all the other major cities, especially in Canada. So we've maintained it as a home base simply because of that. And I mean, having family that are supportive and blah, blah, blah obviously helps too. So that's another reason why we've never left. But like, especially now, like working within the industry where the internet basically has split that wide open, like, why would we need to operate out of Toronto spending a whole whackload of money
Hmm.
when you can provide services for a little bit cheaper living in a dump like Winnipeg?
Sure. Yeah. No, I get it, man. It makes sense. I mean, that's why I live in Rhode Island. I mean, Rhode Island's pretty inexpensive to live for the most part. I mean, it's going up everywhere, but as
Yeah.
far as compared to major cities like, Boston and New York, I mean, forget it. I
It's not
can't.
maybe it's not as cool, but like you're close enough. Who
I mean,
cares?
I'm kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool here. I
I
like
mean,
it.
it's cool in that it's cheap enough that art can still genuinely happen there. And I
Hmm.
mean, Rhode Island has always been a wild ass scene.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been here before?
Yeah, we've been there a good number of times, and I know like the noise slash noise rock scene out of specifically Providence
Yeah.
is there's not a lot that can match that. It's
Well, that.
definitely a strange scene that spawned out of that spot.
Yeah. Well, I take that as quite an honor coming from you because obviously
Oh, big time. Yeah,
you've been around
oh,
all around, so you would
and
know.
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like anyone who knows their noise rock knows the kind of city that is,
Sure.
because it's got a legacy of genuinely creative bands that have come from it,
Hmm. All
which
right. Well,
you can't often say about a lot of cities, especially weirder off the beaten path ones.
yeah,
That
yeah. Well, I noticed you're going on tour soon, but you're not going to come to Providence. You're going to Boston.
Yeah, we're hitting kind of we've never particularly done well in Providence. That's the only
Really?
problem.
Oh, that
Yeah.
sucks, man. That's
I know
weird.
one of the times we played there with Torch, a local there assaulted our bass player, and we had to cancel our set because he had to be taken to the hospital
Oh,
right
Jesus.
before our set. I think that was the last time we tried to play Providence, actually.
Well, I guess it makes sense that you won't come back.
Yeah, good times. Granted, we don't have that bass player anymore, but I mean,
Yeah.
we follow the money. If
Sure.
our
Hey,
agent gets a good offer, we'll show up.
hey, you know what you're doing. That's quite all right with me, man. I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But I'm sure at some point, you probably come back through, if someone, so it's bound to happen eventually.
Yeah, all signs point to yes.
Yeah,
We were supposed to talk about some record, weren't we?
we are. And we'll get there. So back to, Winnipeg and
Just making sure. I got to get my bearings here.
sure, sure. No problem. It's very much stream of consciousness for the most part. I mean, I have some questions for you, but there's actually not that many. But I wanted to get into a little bit of your history, like where did you start, like getting into music as a kid?
As a kid, I was forced into music by my parents playing piano. I think I was 5 or 6 years old.
Hmm.
Hated it. Did not enjoy it at all. But, and I certainly don't look back with rosy glasses, but I do appreciate the genuine music knowledge and uh, the flat out the skills that an instrument like that provides you with when you actually learn it. Because
Hmm.
it's said that when you know how to play piano, it's probably the best at adapting to playing any other instrument. So diving into playing rock instruments was easy.
Hmm.
Um, and that happened more around, I think I would have been like 12 or 13 when I got that itch from the grunge scene
Hmm.
back in the 90s that I've never really been able to scratch properly, no matter
Really?
how hard I try. Yeah.
Well, so what was it then? I mean, I know that, I guess the first record that you kind of got that was an introduction into grunge was Nirvana's In Utero, right?
Yeah, that was the one that broke my brain, and it's been broken ever since. And no matter how hard I try and how much therapy, how much exercise, how many medications I need, it never gets it back together again. Like Humpty Dumpty.
Right. Well, you don't feel like it like that was kind of a blessing that it broke your brain and kind of like exposed you to this world of like crazy music?
I mean, it probably was a blessing, but I mean, in the context of talking to some of my peers, especially within this past year, talking to more um, millennial bands who had a gateway drug of new metal. I definitely feel fortunate that I was affected by the music I was when I was, because I never liked new metal.
Hmm.
I always thought it was corny, and I'm eternally grateful that Nirvana was my gateway drug, because I was a pretentious little shit from a very young age because of that band.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily looking down at people, but the bands that I got into were the bands that people that were 25 and 30 at the time, like making that music and consuming that music. So I always kind of got along better with the older dudes in the scene who were doing things. And because I was so young, kind of gained attention pretty early because of that. And I feel like it was a good time for aggressive music in general, in that like so many different styles were being born in that period. Like that, it was a little bit after the death metal boom of like the late 80s, early 90s, the whole noise rock movement, all the way through to what started happening with Relapse Records near the late 90s, and
Mm.
even some of the movements in hardcore with Victory Records and bands like Dead Guy and Refused putting out like groundbreaking records in the mid to late 90s. Like it was just a really good time for music, and that was all what really brought me into this scene. So
Mm.
I definitely feel fortunate that I came of age in that time, because I mean my roots are still pretty fucking cool.
I agree. No, I understand exactly what you mean. Well, I think I'm a year older than you. So that was the same thing for me. I mean, Nirvana was definitely a big turning point in my life when Nevermind came out. I was like 11.
Yeah.
So same thing, and that's kind of like the thing that's been happening with these conversations I've been doing specifically regarding noise rock music, because I think that Nirvana specifically, that topic, which was the first one that I did, happened to be the one that kind of opened it all up for me as far as just like, is this noise rock? You know,
And I
like
mean, they're
in
definitely
utero, you know?
In Utero definitely had its moments.
Yeah.
Uh, Never mind. I mean, there are definitely noise rock songs on that record.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, it's funny bringing this up in this context. Me and my bassist Scott did an interview with the Chat Pile guys last Friday on the subject of noise rock,
Oh, okay.
and part of the conversation was alluding to that a lot of the pillars in the noise rock scene were never really considered noise rock when they were maybe at the height of popularity in making music.
Hmm.
And it's kind of interesting that they've become these pillars of the noise rock scene despite never really going by that moniker when it was happening. And I'm thinking bands like the Melvins and Jesus Lizard,
Hmm.
even Big Black. Like nobody particularly called them noise rock bands back in the day.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering because when I was talking to the band T Tops about Nirvana, and like that was one of the things that their bassist Matt mentioned to me was that noise rock has been around. I mean, and I guess if you want to think like because when I was a kid, I didn't know. Like when I was like
Yeah.
13 and anywhere from like 11 to 13, I didn't know what the fuck punk or noise rock was. I had no idea. Nirvana was my gateway in. So I didn't realize that Amphetamine Reptile Records had been around since '86 and putting out those types of records, and specifically in like this noise category for many years before that happened,
Mhm.
you know? So I don't know. I think that that's interesting. And so I kind of blame my age for not being as knowledgeable then. But even now, looking back at it, I'm just like, well, that could be considered noise rock. And I guess I was into noise rock from a very young age.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have certain gripes with the modern state of noise rock too, because so many of the people who seem to be a part of the scene have made it very rule based, which I know
Hmm.
for a band like ours has always made us mildly divisive within the scene because we've always blended in aspects of extreme metal and even hardcore.
Sure.
And for some people, that's a bit much. But at the same time, like for me, where we're coming from is I always felt that with a term like noise rock, bands like Today Is the Day and Dazzling Killman and Zenigiva all very much fit into that scene, but they were always very hard on the extreme side themselves.
Mm.
And you also don't see them really get as celebrated in those circles.
Right.
For people that are more, I don't know, that love to lean on bands like Jesus Lizard and Helmet, and stuff
Sure.
of that ilk. I feel like we've always consumed a little bit of a nastier side
Hmm.
than to say mainstream noise rock seems absurd, but I'll go with that for now. The mainstream noise rock scene.
Well, I'm going to get to that too. But so with you saying that, I mean, like, do you feel like you stand in the noise rock scene, or do you not stand in the noise rock scene as far as like your band Ken Mode is concerned?
Ah, see, when we started touring, there was no noise rock scene.
Hmm.
Like the 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 kind of forefathers that brought it into, especially the early 2000s, bands like Unsane and the Melvins and Today's the Day were really the only ones left at the time. There were bands who kind of flirted with it a little, and I feel like a lot of the sentiments maybe translated more into the hardcore scene, and
Hmm.
particularly what was going on with like Hydra Head Records and Escape Artist Records, which actually we were on Escape Artist Records, go figure.
Right.
Um, but we were very much a noise rock band playing the riffs a little bit faster and a little bit more of them per song.
Hmm.
So I always felt like we were a noise rock band at our very core, but no one talked about noise rock back then.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it is, especially now that it's becoming something that people are talking about again with the resurgence of, I mean, the now shamed daughters from 2018, and now a chat pile getting a whole bunch of larger scene acknowledgement. It is entertaining to see the term kind of getting almost like a renaissance. And I mean, we're certainly still associated with it, and people, maybe this record will do well for us because we've been one of those bands that has been carrying the genre, for a lack of a better way of putting it, for the last 20 years when there really wasn't a lot of new bands doing it.
Hmm. Yeah. So you kind of just like slid right in because you've been going at it since 99. And then like as
Yeah.
this resurgence is kind of coming about, like Kenmo just slips right in there being like, oh yeah, we're noise rock too. And like now you're already at kind of at that mid-level range type thing,
Yeah, which is kind
reaping
of weird
benefits, I guess, maybe a
because
little
I
bit.
mean, we were as like kids. We had literally on our third T-shirt we ever made. We had it was the Ken Mode 2003 first U.S. tour ever, and we called it the Mammoth Metallic Noise Rock Tour.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So it's not like we're like jumping on the bandwagon now. We've been using the moniker for a long ass time.
Right, right. No, it
But
just
it's
happened to be that these transpiring at the same time that you kind of just like came to it right when this wave is already kind of like on its way up.
yeah, and I mean it'd be cool. I mean, it is very much kind of like in the 90s. I feel like the environment that we're all a part of, noise rock just kind of makes a little more sense right now. Like
Hmm.
how filled with existential dread everyone is, and just the general distrust of everyone.
Right.
It just, I don't know. There's something about the attitude of everyone that just feels kind of grimy coming out of the pandemic, and I feel like this genre just works on a certain level.
Hmm. Well, so tell me a little bit about that if you can. Like what is your definition of what noise rock is?
Kind of angular, discordant guitars, heavy bass, driving drums,
Mm-hmm.
typically. But I've always liked to expand past that. Like, I mean, for me, I never particularly felt like all noise rock had to be like a mid-paced lumbering thing. I liked my templates were bands like the Melvins and Today Is the Day, um, where they'd have vast variety in their songs.
Hmm.
And for me, that's why, be it a blessing or a curse, we've always played around with very different styles, blending in indie rock, extreme metal, industrial. We like slow songs, we like mid-paced songs, we like to go fast sometimes. Like, we don't, it's boring doing the same thing over and over again. But
Yeah.
I've and I mean, there are noise rock purists who that's what they want. They want a Mets record that does this one thing, and they do it very well, but they do that one thing.
Hmm.
And we've never really been about that.
Hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that. I've been listening to the records and been listening to the three tracks that are available off your new record currently, which even those alone, just stand alone, kind of different from each other and kind of like have slightly different vibes to them.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we've always enjoyed doing that. I feel like we get better at executing our vision with every year that passes.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Which
Yeah, and I'll ask you about that a little as we continue on a little bit. So I asked you here today to speak about an album that's important to you. Today is the day's Willpower is what you chose.
that is correct. A desert island record for me.
Hmm. Yeah. So tell me what was the first time you heard it? When was the first time you heard it?
I heard it in a record store in probably 1997, by It was played for me by a man named Brendan, who ran the shop and was also in a noise rock band himself called Mickey Moto in Winnipeg.
Hmm.
And this is kind of a weird, long-winded story. I was instructed to go down to his store because it was close to where I lived by a student teacher in my honors English class in grade 10, who was the front person for the noise rock band Stagmummer, who just got finished tracking their debut record with Steve Albini like the summer prior.
Whoa.
And we ended up becoming friends with all those old men and played shows with them when we started our band in 99. But it's just a strange turn of events that kind of chained together.
Hmm.
And this student teacher felt drawn to us, me and our original bassist Daryl, because he was wearing a Cows shirt on the first day of school.
Oh,
And
okay.
he was a little. The student teacher Zach was a little bald guy, and I remember Daryl saying some little bald guy came up to me in the hallway, said, "You like the Cows? I love the Cows," and it freaked him out. And apparently he went to band practice that night and talked about, there's these crazy kids in my school this year. They like the
Yeah.
Cows, they like Unseen, they like Black Flag. What is going on here?
Yeah,
So
right.
that's, yeah, that, and he ended up getting me into the Dazzling Killmen, Zenny Giva, Melt Banana, all that skin graft stuff.
Hmm.
He told me to go down to this record shop, flip the record, and he got me into all the old AMRAP material and into bands like Neurosis. So it's just, yeah, a very weird scene going on in Winnipeg at the time that
Hmm.
encouraged noise rock very heavily.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you happen to run into that crew, those people that were the older dudes that were doing it already. And luckily for you, I mean, you like what typically happens is you meet like-minded people and you're super excited about it, especially when
Mhm.
it's something as weird as what noise rock was then. It's just like, there was like fewer of us around. So
Yeah,
you latch on to those people when you find them. Those are your new best friends.
and we were a weird city in that too, because like I've talked about this in other interviews that I feel like what makes a scene is a recording engineer. That your city scene is only as strong as your best recording engineer. And a lot of the scenes that ended up becoming something that people still to this day talk about
Hmm.
usually had a really noteworthy producer that came along for the ride. And that's why those records were documented so well.
Hmm.
And I kind of feel bad for my city because we didn't get good ones until probably the mid 2000s. And a lot of the bands that were around in the 90s didn't really get proper documentation that I feel would have put that scene more on the map for us. The most
Hmm.
noteworthy noise rock band from Winnipeg in the 90s was a band called Kittens. And they were really only a thing in Canada. And that's because they recorded in Toronto. I don't think they ever toured the US, but they probably would have went over really well because they were really catchy and wrote really great songs.
Hmm.
Um, Over the years, I would end up collaborating with a few of the members of that band, and actually their bassist Jamil has played in Ken Mode, and to this day we still hang out and play music with him. So we love that guy.
Hmm.
But that's kind of just the nature of getting into, I feel, any of these punk derivative scenes anyway. It's a bunch of music nerds who love this thing so much and are just seeking other individuals to bond with over their mutual love for what this music is about.
Mm-hmm. You're right, right, exactly. So going back to today's the day. So you're in the record store at your teacher's request or
Yeah,
recommendation. You hear today is the day, and what happens to your brain?
honestly, at the time, it felt a little bit much.
Yeah.
I liked it and I appreciated the angular nature of that record. And at the time, I got my brother to buy it because I didn't have enough money to pick
Hmm.
that one up too.
Oh, okay.
Um, I feel like it didn't really sink in until a year later. Um, I probably would have been in the 12th grade then. And I think my tastes were starting to lean in a bit more of a metallic way, and that was around the time that I got into like Slayer's Rain and Blood. Like up to that point, I never really felt like I liked metal,
Hmm.
despite a lot of the bands that I enjoyed obviously had very intense leanings in that direction, like Neurosis and Dazzling Killman. I'd argue are almost more extreme than a lot of extreme metal. But
Mm.
I think it was that year that for some reason or another, the Today's the Day record just clicked above all else. And it's one of those ones I partially blame Al Sutton's production, um, which I know he worked with bands like Laughing Hyenas, I believe. Did he do Laughing Hyenas or was that Butch Vig? He
Mm.
might have done Laughing. I should look that up.
Okay.
I know he did a lot of the Don Caballero records. Um,
Okay.
and it's just, he's got a very unique and characteristic in recording bands. And I know Steve Austin gets the producer credit on this record, but I do know that Al Sutton did the engineering, and like it sounds like an Al Sutton record.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
and just the way he was able to capture this lineup of Today's the Day, it feels perfect for me. It's just, it never gets boring. It's been one of those records that has been with me for probably 25 years now, and it is still just as important now as it was to me when I was a teenager.
Mm. Cool. Well, it sounds like it was an excellent choice for you then.
Yeah. Now, borderline, like with so many of these things, it feels like luck. These things that just kind of happen to you, and part of your brain just goes and never unbends, right?
Right, right. So this bent you in the opposite direction from Nirvana. 13-year-old you, Nirvana breaks it. This one bends it back the other way.
Or maybe took that bend there and then went like
Yeah.
this.
Right. Just really, really messed you up.
Yep. Yeah. And then I know within a year of that, I think Temple of the Morning Star came out. I think I got into Today's the Day around the time that the self-titled came out. That's when I picked up Willpower, and I think I got the self-titled shortly thereafter. And then Temple of the Morning Star came out like the next year. And when I really dove in, I remember anticipating In the Eyes of God coming out, and that one just like bulldozed everything. That was graduating high school, and like that was like the theme music, and it was just
Yeah.
one of the most miserable sounding records ever. I guess I'm digressing from the original subject matter here, but
No,
it
that's
was
okay.
just Today's the Day was very much like me leaving high school and shitting on the legacy of high school all at the same time.
Right. Well, that's a pretty good motivator. I mean, because high school pretty much sucked, didn't it?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
anyone who did anything with their life, usually high school sucked.
Yes, most likely high school didn't mean shit to them.
No.
It was a great motivator to do better things, I think.
Amen.
So,
That's been one of the things I've honestly kind of lamented about this whole process of going through a global pandemic, is I have not had to hear the opinions of so many fucking stupid people in my life since I was in high school. Like just the level of discourse you hear just from fucking idiots, that why am I hearing this? That's where this last period of like 2.5 years, it feels like I've been dragged back to high school.
yeah, it kind of does. I didn't really think of it that way, but yeah, I mean, the floodgates have opened for stupidity, really.
Yeah, and they all want to talk about it all the time.
And
I
I
wish
don't.
they had, yeah, I wish they had more to do. I wish everyone had more to do.
Right, right. Well, I had read about that, about your new album, because obviously it was created in the midst of the pandemic, and you were having an issue with that, as far as I mean, as we all were, kind of in a way, grappling with a lot of our own personal issues, and that kind of bled through into your work, right?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I've gone on record as saying countless times now that I mean, I relatively early on in my adulthood, recognized that I have a battle with clinical depression that will be likely ongoing for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I developed a sequence of coping mechanisms and ways to manage keeping it kind of level, without needing to take medication. And it was largely based on this music and practicing Muay Thai. And neither of those could happen during the pandemic.
Right.
So I spiraled a little bit. And honestly, writing music was the only thing that really kept me going forward, I think. And
Right.
at least helping me get out of bed in the morning.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I mean, that's those are two big things. Like, I mean, like, what else did you have anything to fall back on, or like, did you at least try something different in order to kind of like replace those mechanisms?
I tried to train at home a little bit, but it is not the same.
Can't
Um,
grapple with yourself. Well,
no,
we kind of do in our mind, but that's different.
yeah, very different. And just, I mean, the act of practicing or even playing shows, like you're not going to replicate that at home. The
Right.
closest I could get was really just trying to occupy my mind, and I did, as much as it's become like a meme worthy joke about in the band circles, about people trying to create that pandemic album and teaching themselves how to record stuff on their computer. I legitimately did that. I used it as a tool to do pre-production work, and I'd never had those skills before. I
Hmm.
messed around with 4 tracks when I was in high school, but like I haven't. I tried to get into digital audio workstations in 2007, but they were considerably more complicated back then,
Hmm.
and the computing power just wasn't there.
Right.
Um, like flash forward to 2020, and you can do that on any like laptop that you do work on.
Right.
So that's what I did. I got a little M audio device with a MIDI plugin, and taught myself how to program MIDI, downloaded the Kurt Ballou Room Sounds drum package of
Hmm.
drum samples, and started piecing things together. And uh, pretty quickly, I started developing material. And I'd go through periods where I'd crash and was unable to do anything and was horribly depressed. And then I'd pick it back up again and spit out a whole bunch of new material. And that
Hmm.
was kind of the way I cycled through the couple years until we were actually able to start getting together again, in between bizarre lockdown periods.
Right.
But we ended up writing 2 albums worth of material, and about roughly half of it was written just by me in isolation, and then the other half was work that we were able to actually collaborate the old school way in a jam room.
Hmm. Right. Well, that's cool. Well, so how are you feeling now?
Better,
Yeah. You haven't gone on tour yet?
yeah. It'll be interesting to see how touring feels. I am very much looking forward to getting to connect with people in the community again, because I know that was another major thing that I kind of developed a sense of community both in the martial arts world and, obviously no secret, the music community. For, I mean, almost everyone I know is because of me being in a band, and all of my lifelong friends are because of being in a band.
Mm.
This band.
Right.
um, and the martial arts community really fell apart through the pandemic, and like it's a scene that's very littered with conspiracy theorists and wacko COVID deniers, and it was a very disappointing time for me,
Mm.
facing the levels of ignorance that came out of it. And I've kind of been mourning the loss of that sense of community with them. And I think that's part of why I'm putting so much stock in these upcoming tours, because I need to reconnect with my music people, because a lot of them, although they were under a great deal of emotional duress over the pandemic, I know most people in the scene didn't go fucking stupid.
It's always been there. It's just it always was
Yeah,
hiding in the back, and now it just kind of creeped to the front.
yeah. And I need to be with my people again.
Yeah, man. No, I hear you. And then, well, I wish the best of luck to you on your tour. I hope it all goes well. I hope you're able to complete all of your dates.
Oh, we
And
certainly I mean, I hope so. I shouldn't say that now, because like, who knows, we probably will catch COVID on the tour at some point. I just hope we don't get that sick so we don't even know.
right, yeah, right. And yeah, I mean, it's still a kind of weird limbo for people to be in. I mean, like I'm still hearing about horror stories of bands going out and then having to come back home like midway through.
Yeah.
So,
I'm also hearing other stories of bands clearly catching COVID on the road and not telling anyone, and just
oh,
doing all the dates. So it's like a weird mixed bag. There are those who are crippled by guilt and go home. And
Right.
the others are just, fuck it. We've done it sick before. Venture on.
Right.
I honestly, yeah, I don't know how to feel about that because, like,
Yeah, it's a really gray area, huh?
yeah,
That's the
unless
weird part
something
about it.
really beats the shit out of me, yeah.
Right,
And I mean,
right.
with a lot of people, like, unless it's beating the shit out of them,
No, exactly.
why care at this point?
Yeah. No, I remember when it first came around, I was just like, do I have it? Do I have it? My throat's scratchy. And it's just like, oh no, you can be sick. You can just have a cold. You know, it's
Yeah,
still possible.
that's the other brutal realization, right? As soon as like everything kind of opened up to stay again, it was like, well, now we're just getting regular sick again, and this fucking sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just everyone's just being hyper aware because now it's just like everyone thinks it might be COVID. Oh no, I got a headache. It might be COVID. I got to go get tested.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, been there, done that. I've had a
yeah,
lot of headaches over the last while, and maybe it's COVID.
it could be. You got to get checked,
Yeah.
man. Go get tested. All right. Well,
No.
let's move on to the record. So today is the day's Willpower. I didn't know it. You chose it, and so
Oh, damn.
I've been getting into it, man. I've been getting into a lot of records lately because I've been being exposed to a lot of stuff that I hadn't, passed by for whatever reason. So let's see. The first track on the album is the self-titled song, the title. What do they call that? The title track.
Title track. So
Willpower.
a funny one with this, it has a sample from the movie Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
I was obsessed with the album before I ever saw the movie. So the first time that sample actually happened when I watched the movie, like I got goosebumps.
You were waiting for the music to just fucking kick in.
It's like she said the thing, and I in my head I go boo doo 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 boo doo 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 doo. Just like holy shit.
Yeah, right. That's a pretty intense scene in the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, a sample is well used when something like that happens, right?
Right. And it's always funny, like when you kind of catch it after the fact, like the sample from the music first, and then all of a sudden you're like watching something, it's like, oh shit, this is it. This is where he got it from.
It's just a wild experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure with most people, they like. I mean, if you haven't seen Goodfellas, fucking see Goodfellas. But like, yeah, goddamn, the scene that samples from, and then this song. Good lord, what a song!
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I have a feeling that the majority of the conversation we're going to have about this record is going to have to do with this song. It's kind of the centerpiece of the album. I mean, it's a good reason. There's a good reason why it's the title track.
Yeah, I mean, there are other. I had a bizarre experience with the song Sidewinder when I was in university studying. And I mean, I went to business school, which is filled with the biggest douchebags you could ever meet in a university.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never particularly happy when I was at school, but I remember studying in their main library, listening to this record with headphones on before like big earmuff headphones were fashionable again. And I literally remember being mocked walking around with them on. But I digress. Sidewinder was playing, and there's a break in the middle where he's whispering, and I'd never noticed the recorded breathing in the track that's coming from the background. And for some reason, my brain cued in on that sound in that instance, and all the hairs on my arms stood up. And like the back of my neck, it felt like someone was breathing on the back of my neck.
Ooh,
which just made like it creeped me out. And I mean, it's pretty tucked in there, so it's worth a headphone listen for that specific spot, just to hear that. Like, it's just, ugh.
It's that gentle too. Like, you barely hear it.
Super gentle and super creepy.
Wow.
And then when the guitar kicks in, it's just, oh man.
Okay, I'll have to give it a re-listen. I have listened to it obviously a few times already. Just I haven't heard that yet. But Willpower. Okay, so let's see. So right off the jump, the title track, probably a little bit of a double meaning here. Willpower is the second studio album by Today Is the Day, released in September 1994. And what I found out was that the album was recorded just a few months after Steve Austin's father, whom he had not seen for months at the time, died in a violent car crash.
Yeah, I remember hearing about how he was relatively fucked up from the experience.
I can imagine. Yeah, you have to be.
Surprise.
I mean, it says that he hadn't seen him in a few months, so I'm assuming maybe there was some fallout between them and they weren't at a speaking point, but that's almost even worse, right? That you lose a parent under that circumstance.
And not be able to resolve anything.
Right.
I understand part of the lore of this album also is that his amplifier was all fucked up. Something bizarre happened to it that he wasn't able to repair it before the session, and that's part of why the guitar on this album sounds unlike any other Today's the Day record. I'm not sure whether or not that's 100% true, and I don't remember where I heard that.
Okay. I was going to ask you, do you have any experience with Steve Austin and Today Is the Day? Have you guys played with them at all?
We actually toured with them in 2013 for like 6 weeks through North America. So,
oh wow, okay,
we have a fair amount of experience with Today's the Day.
So you have a close relationship with Steve, or not?
I wouldn't say close at this point, but we're definitely like band buds. Would love to do dates with them again at some point. I hope we can line that up before we all die. But yes, I mean, Steve was super cool to us. I feel like the lineups that they've had, none of them for me quite stand up to the original lineup that was on specifically like the Supernova, this, and Self-Titled. But I mean, I'm obviously glad they're still out there doing the thing.
Right.
And I'm stoked to always hear what they have coming up next. But these, particularly the Amphetamine Reptile and the first two Relapse records, are like just part of my DNA musically. Always will be.
Right.
And I like to think that as a band, we are the sons of bands like Today Is the Day and the Dazzling Killmen and Dead Guy, waving the flag of a little bit seedier side of noise rock and metal.
Yeah, no, I would probably agree with that. I mean, I think that sounds about right, lineage wise. You guys were at that right age to be exposed to this and to have it influence your sound. And speaking of which, I mean, this song Willpower, it's a great example of some of that diversity that this band was capable of. Like, it's a great opening track, especially for me, having not heard the band before. I was just like, okay, wow, this is interesting because, it kind of starts off as like almost a kind of typical metal almost, and then it has that breakdown into like this like weird emo kind of thing towards the end,
The way Steve played with melody on this record, I think is well, I think it's the best work of his entire career. And I think it's, in terms of what he did with that genre in general, it's, I believe, the best record that Amphetamine Reptile ever put out.
Well, that's a bold statement.
Yeah. Yep.
Hot take.
I mean, in terms of my favorite records of all time, it's easily a top 5 one, and very clearly my favorite record that AmRep ever put out.
Okay. Well, so now this song, completely wild as far as like what we were talking about, is the that kind of progressions that the song would go through, and how they kind of meld genres almost even. So it seems like a perfect example of how this album might have led you into writing the way you write. Would you say that's true? Yeah,
definitely. And even just the way it segues into the next track with My First Knife, the guitar and bass interplay, the way that song even just starts, like it's just, I feel that song is just iconic, even though it's iconic to what, maybe 1,500 people, but it's just, I don't know. There's something about just the way the guitar and bass play together on that, and the way the song erupts. It is just too perfect.
Yeah, no, My First Knife, I don't really have anything for that song. I was kind of like, diving into it, kind of really, I analyze music a lot for this
Mhm.
show in particular. And I, I can't even remember the lyrics right now, but I remember looking them over and was just like, I'm not really quite sure what's going on here. Like, I mean, My First Knife, and then it kind of actually almost has like this weird, like touching on like some kind of like love thing, all right? Like some kind of affair thing or some kind of relationship situation, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess honestly, I tune out with a lot of the lyrics.
Sure, sure. And they're kind of hard to grasp. Like when you're just listening to music, I realize that we don't really, especially for this style of music, the style of music that you play, even, it's just like, I don't hear your lyrics when I'm listening to the music. I mean, I have to kind of sit with them and kind of like put them in front of me and follow along while you're screaming, you know?
I feel bad because with a lot of aggressive music, I acknowledge the tool that it is for expressing oneself, but I'm very hypercritical of the actual writing that goes into the lyric side, and I'm not a big fan of a lot of lyricists in heavy music. So that's
Hmm.
part of why I make a point of tuning out what's actually being said. I'm more focused on the tone of the voice that's doing it than I am what's actually being said.
Mm. Yeah. No, and that's how I normally listen to like music in general, like any style of music, like whatever I'm listening to,
Yeah.
that's usually what's happening. It's just kind of another layer of instrumentation. It's not
Exactly. Yeah, and I
mo-
mean it's meant to be, and that's part of why a lot of heavy music is uses the vocals that it does. Is it's meant to be another instrument, and how do you up the ante in the extremity of a lot of these styles? Well,
mm,
you make these false vocal cords flap all over the place.
yeah. All right. Well, I want to move on to the next song, Nothing to Lose. Let's see. So, not really sure what to make of these lyrics either. But on face value, Nothing to Lose, the title of the song, it seems like you've gone out on a limb on your new record. Do you feel like you have nothing to lose?
I mean, musically a little bit. Like
Yeah,
I don't, as much as I want people to like what we're doing, I'm not doing this for them. So
sure.
it's entirely ego driven, and if I am scratching that itch, I've accomplished what I need it to.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, once you record it and put a whole bunch of money into it, then you kind of hope that people like it, that you can recoup some of that. But yeah, in terms of the actual creative process, we're trying to do the thing that we like to do and trying to do it better than we ever have before, and trying to express something that feels raw and honest. And that was the main driver behind the way we approached the null and void when it comes out next year.
Right. Yeah, I read about that. You actually have. I mean, you just mentioned it a little while ago how you kind of came up with 2 albums worth of material, but you actually have a follow up to this already in the can.
Yeah, it's recorded, it's mastered, it's been sitting since January.
So, you intend it to be kind of digested as a double album, uh, but you're not going to release it until when?
Probably next fall. We want to give them proper space. And
Yeah.
that was the thing. Um, we wrote it all as though it fit together like one movement, but then separated it into two distinct albums that had their own voice and their own story to tell. And we don't think we're the kind of band that should put out 75 minutes worth of music because that's just too much for people. I don't think anyone wants, shy of like diehards, nobody wants to sit down and listen to 75 minutes of what we have to say. And I know the straight
Uh,
stats of the way the industry works. You can put out a double album and people are only going to listen to the first 15 minutes of side A.
right.
So I didn't want to waste a whole 3/4 of the material just because we needed this ego flex to put out a gigantic double album
Hmm.
concept bullshit.
Right.
I had to think strategically about that, and I want people to hear this stuff because I
Hmm.
think the variety of material we put together with these two records is worth being heard.
Okay. So looking that actually kind of ties into the next topic we were going to discuss, the song Golden Calf. Now, so I did a little bit of research about Golden Calf. Turns out that worship of the Golden Calf is seen as a supreme act of apostasy. Apostasy, I'm not sure if you're familiar, being the total rejection of Christianity by a baptized person who, having at one time professed their Christian faith, publicly rejects it. Were you familiar with that, or is that new?
The concept, yeah,
Okay.
but not like to that degree.
Sure. Yeah, I do a little bit of research for this. So, what do you feel like you've rejected from the writing process or the recording process this time around?
What did I reject? I rejected the traditional method of recording vocals in the studio because
Oh,
I destroyed my voice before going in. So
okay.
yeah, last summer, I mean, it was a hot summer everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know in Western Canada, we had really fun wildfires all through August and September
Hmm.
that kind of just had the general environment a little bit smoky up here. And because we don't all live in the same place, Scott lives in Saskatoon, which is like a 8.5 hour drive from us here in Winnipeg. When he came in to rehearse to actually go into the studio, I blew my voice out during the rehearsals. So I attempted to record a couple songs in the studio and just it didn't sound good. And I kept getting worse and it wasn't repairing. So I had to pivot and buy some additional equipment to record my vocals at home.
Hmm.
And I ended up doing that, just barely keeping ahead of the mix schedule throughout the fall. And I don't ever want to go back to doing it in the studio.
Hmm. Interesting.
It allotted me the freedom to really drill down and micromanage my delivery on everything. And if my voice was getting a little bit fried, I'd stop.
Right.
And with a lot of these songs, sometimes I would finish them over 3 different sessions, which normally when we're in the studio and time is money, you try to cram in as much as you possibly can. And if it doesn't sound as optimal as it can, tough shit, because we need to get this done.
Right. You got to move on.
But with this, I could really get nerdy with it and record as many backing vocals as I wanted, and I could experiment with different approaches. And it just, I think this is the best my voice has ever sounded on record, and it's because of that. Because
Yeah.
I got to do it at home, and I did all the engineering myself. I did all the vocal comping myself. And it just, I think that was a great experience in getting to do that, and I never want to go back.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, because you said that. I was just thinking about how many records you guys have put out. How many is it now? Is this like the eighth?
This is the 8th, yeah.
Okay, and then you have a ninth now
We
following up
do, yeah.
very very soon. So with a band, and what, 20 years, right?
23 this year.
23.
Yeah.
So with just thinking about those things and like thinking about like being a music fan and loving a band and, you know, being turned on to them at some point in their career, whether it be at the beginning or whether it be in the middle, fans develop some kind of like connection to that band and feel like they have a specific period they love. You know,
Yeah.
like you were saying, you like Today Is the Day's first 3 plus the 2 after Relapse. And that's your bread and butter as far as Today Is the Day. I mean, you're not discrediting what they do now, but that was your era that you really appreciated, because bands progress and they evolve into something. And a lot of the times, I know from my experience, is that when that band makes that evolution, they kind of lose some fans. They either lose some and they gain a ton, or they just, you know, kind of lose some and then gain a few. Like they kind of are able to kind of trickle along still, but they lose some people eventually.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance. And I mean,
Right.
It ultimately depends on what you're doing and whether it's continuing to strike a chord and how you're progressing. Like
Hmm. Well,
some
how do you
people,
feel like you're progressing? Because you're at that point already. You're like, 2 decades in, 9 records in. Like, where do you feel like your evolution is going?
honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a large part of what, at least in my opinion, keeps us vital is that specifically, like with Scott and I, we're horrifically addicted to new music,
Hmm.
and we genuinely care about seeking out and hearing new, fresh ideas. And I know, I mean, I within the last like 10 years, I've been mildly critical of bands getting back together and doing the revival shtick because most of the best ideas are being created by 20-year-olds who are just pissed off.
Hmm.
And as we age, we have a tendency to stop listening to young people
Hmm.
just by our very nature. And Scott and I at least put in an effort to try to keep up with what's going on in music, especially extreme music, because like the most extreme of the extreme is going to be happening in the some kid's mom's basement, right?
Hmm.
And I don't know. I think you need to hear new and exciting things all the time if you're going to not stagnate. And I hope that we're not stagnating yet. And I hope we're self-aware enough that if we do start, that we're going to have to pivot somewhere. But I
Yeah.
mean, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I know that there's no way for you to tell where you're going to go because you don't know. I mean, it's just you're not there yet. But maybe just like as far as like where are these records compared to like the last few records? How do you feel about that comparison?
I think there's a little bit more industrial going on, at least on Null. Um, I want to continue flexing additional instrumentation, particularly now that we have Catherine in the band, so we can execute it live.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
noticed that.
I've been enjoying using synthesizers and especially her on saxophone. So, how we end up utilizing that with her writing parts in the onset, it'll be interesting because I know with these two records, I wrote pretty much all of the synth parts on my own.
Mm,
Um, and we did get her to write, for the most part, her sax parts with some direction from Scott and I. Um, but yeah, I think just we'll find out where we end up going the more we mess around with different instruments because I think that in itself provides challenges for us to break out of the mold that we're used to.
mm,
Even just with these records, um, traditionally we've always written things very guitar and bass centric, and to
mm,
make saxophone and synthesizer and piano and things like that work, you have to leave space for them,
mm.
and even consciously leaving the space is changing the way we're writing. So
Right.
it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
This is wild, man. I think you're at your cusp right now. I think you're at that point, that turning point in your career.
Hopefully, it'll be interesting to see if people jump on board.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting actually. I congratulate you on your work, man. I really do like it. I mean, what I've been able to hear so far from the new record, because there's only 3 tracks that are available, and I wasn't given an advance copy. No fault of yours. No,
Oh shit!
no,
Someone
that's all
should have
right.
said that to you.
No, I gotta buy a lot of records, man. I've been talking to so many people. I just gotta go get them already. But when is it coming out?
September 23rd, so we're getting close. I think we're
Yeah,
almost 2 weeks away.
right. Okay,
Yeah,
cool, man.
some of the serious flex is done on the non-single tracks.
Yeah, no, I know you have like well, you have 2 videos out already.
Three.
Oh wait,
Yeah, we
all
did
3 of those songs?
unresponsive. Yeah,
Okay.
unresponsive video too, and we actually have another one coming out on Friday.
Oh, look at that. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll have to stay tuned for that one. We'll let people know about it for sure. Let's see. So back to this record because we have to just finish this up. Sidewinder, you were mentioning. I don't have anything for that. I just think that it's another weird, convoluted love song,
Yeah,
mildly
yeah,
inappropriate.
yeah. I kind of thought that we were meant to be. I love that part so much.
Yeah, no, I mean it works in the music, but like kind of out of context, the song sounds a little kind of creepy.
Oh yeah, big time. I
But
mean,
what?
most songs do.
Maybe most of what you're listening to, I'm not sure.
There's no secret. I listen to some twisted shit.
Sure, that's fine. So the next song being Many Happy Returns. Um, let's see. So based on what I can make out of these lyrics, the overall thematic content of the album, I suppose this title is a little sarcastic. You know, it's because it's like what? So Many Happy Returns. It's kind of an 18th century idiom, has been used as a salutation to offer the hope that a happy day being marked would recur many more times. So this album doesn't do any of that. It's
No, I can't imagine there are any happy returns.
no, not for this album. So what is your stance on the use of sarcasm as it relates to your music?
I mean, it's littered all throughout the process. In fact, most of our lyrics, if anyone were to take any of them at face value, they're almost certainly wrong with what they're thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
with
Well,
the exception of probably a good deal of the new material. Because
okay.
I, at least with this new one, I took a different approach for sure. But our loved record and our success record are full of lyrical sound bites that likely don't mean what you think they would. And we had a lot of fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with this batch of material, I just didn't feel like that was conveying the right sense of honesty that I wanted to out of what was going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, a lot of the lyrics are much more stream of conscience style. And I historically, when I'm coming up with vocal parts and actual lyrics for songs, I do a good deal of editing from all kinds of different writings and coming up with like a cohesive piece of poetry that I feel like works.
Mm.
And this, there were many songs where I just sat down and wrote out a page worth of stuff, and that ended up being the song,
Right.
which I don't know. I guess a large part of it had to do with just the general vibe I was trying to convey, or maybe I was just genuinely onto something, or maybe it's all total garbage. I don't know, but I felt like it worked in the moment, and
Right.
I'm very happy with the way it all turned out. And
Yeah.
it definitely it feels more vibrant to me as a result.
As dark as it is, it's vibrant.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, because you were being honest with yourself, and you were kind of like exercising some demons, obviously, that you know, as along with everybody else in this world, you were experiencing some major trauma, you know,
Mhm.
and you were processing through it through your lyrics, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and maybe part of why I wanted to approach all the lyrics for this batch of material in that way is that maybe I felt like it would be a way of connecting with people more. I don't know. Maybe there
Mm,
was just in a subconscious manner because I definitely wasn't thinking that necessarily in the moment. All I knew was the approach that I had been taking felt like trash, and I wanted this to not feel like trash. So,
hmm.
um, but like kind of now that I have a little bit more clarity being outside of the process, I do feel like as people consume these works, they may feel more relatable, given that we all collectively experienced something similar in the nature of what we went through. Obviously, everyone absorbs it in different ways, and many people had it so much worse
Right.
that I don't want to pretend like, oh, my life was horrible. I was about as lucky as you could be through this damn period, but
Hmm.
my brain didn't give me any breaks.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We can all relate on that regard, at least, like in that level, at least, you know, if nothing
Yeah.
else.
And then you feel like a fucking loser when you feel terrible. It's like, what do I have to complain about? You piece of shit. You shouldn't feel so terrible. Ooh.
We all go through those moments, you know. I mean, like, you know, everyone always feels like their life is shit, especially when shit's going bad.
Yeah. And I
You
mean,
know,
ultimately, we have too much leisure to think about it too. And that
mm,
in itself is a blessing.
right. Well, so I mean, I think that's pretty much it for covering the record. The last song, the Simple Touch, I was gonna skip anyway. That's like the ballad of the record. That was interesting.
Yeah. It's a good song.
It is a good song.
It's
But
interesting.
very different from the rest of the record. Very much a ballad. Uh, then Promised Land was the last song on the original recording, at least. Great song. Um, Lyrically, don't know what to make of it. It opens up with another movie sample, which there's a very big theme in this record.
Yeah. I
But
feel like I should have listened to this whole record before talking about this because as we're going through song by song, shy of Willpower, My First Knife, and Sidewinder, things all meld together because every time I listen to this record, it's short enough that I listen to the whole thing all the way through. So I
yeah,
don't remember which song name corresponds to which song.
I see. Okay,
And
yeah,
I mean, song album lengths like that have certainly influenced me in the way I like to approach our records too, where you'd rather have people wanting more than having people get bored.
mm,
Um, but I love a record like this where it's like, man, that ended too quick. Let's throw it on again.
sure, yeah, for sure. No fat, man. Just a
Yeah,
good solid record. But the original recording ends with this unlisted cover of Amazing Grace,
yeah,
and
which
that
is
kind
kind of
of
a weird one.
it's kind of weird, but I feel like it ties back into that initial topic of Steve Austin losing his father tragically just before the recording of it. I feel like it might have even almost been an homage.
Probably, yeah, like
Yeah,
a send off
right.
to a complicated relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because he was a Southerner as well, isn't he from like Tennessee?
Yeah, I believe so. And I
Right.
know he moved all over the place, but I know the band formed, I think, in Nashville or
Hmm.
was it Memphis? Fuck, I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but I know it was Tennessee, so it's Southern,
Yeah.
So that seems to make a lot of sense. But overall, great record. Thank you for choosing it, and thank you for turning me on to it, man.
So I feel honored that I could be the one to pass on a record like this to someone. It's yeah, one that's very near and dear to me. And
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I know Steve Austin now, again, just adds to what I was saying before about the truly special nature of this scene and this sub genre and whole counterculture of music in in that if you're doing things that are exciting and honest, um, generally speaking, the people that you looked up to and made you want to do the thing embrace you with open arms because they're all just a bunch of nerds who love this music too. And
Yeah.
it's so cool that I know guys like him and Chris Spencer and Nick Sakes from the Dazzling Killman. Like it's so weird as an adult to get to converse with people that you listened to when you were a teenager.
Hmm. Yeah, I bet, man. Sounds great. Speaking of that community and that love, I've been having a lot of these conversations specifically because of No Coast Fest, which you're participating in. You're the headliners for the Sunday night, the final evening.
Mm-hmm.
What do you expect there? I mean, this is your first time doing No Coast, correct?
Yeah, they'd been trying to get us down there for a while. Granted, they haven't really even been a fest for that long, but
Yeah.
I know the first one. I think they'd asked us around the first one, but we were in a weird position where we didn't have a work visa nor any intention of touring that fall. So we kind of just said, like, we're going to be working on a new record. Let's do it. Ask us again next year. And then
Mm,
the pandemic hit. It's like, fuck. I think they asked us last year and it was like, we don't even know if we can get into the States. No. Ask us next year. We'll have a record. And
right.
this time we booked this whole tour around doing this fest. So
Oh, sweet.
I'm glad this happened because we haven't been to Texas since 2015. So it was a
Oh,
great reason to book a run all the way down to Texas and up the East Coast and get out and do the thing again.
Yeah.
I'm just excited to have barbecue again, my man.
Me too, man. Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I'll be down there. I'm not going to be there for Sunday, though. I'm sorry.
Ah, man, you're missing the best day.
I know.
I'm,
I know.
I'm kind of bummed that we aren't getting to see any of the other days because we turned it into a tour. So
You're going to be
we're
working.
doing the thing on all the other days. Yeah, we're doing Austin on the Friday and Houston on the Saturday, and then No Coast, and then off to Louisiana the next day.
Well, that sounds fun. Regardless, I mean, I know that the festival is pretty packed, and it sounds like great bills every day.
Yeah,
But obviously, for the guys working that are moving, they have to be touring through that time, and in order to get there and get back, it makes sense. But
yeah,
I,
it's just too bad. Next time, if they have us back, I'll have to strategically, like, I don't know. I hope we're either so popular that we can warrant getting money for a one-off so we can hang out all weekend, or I'll have to strategically book days off.
Right. Yeah, man, just block out some time. It'll be fun.
We're capable. We've been doing the thing for a while.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Jesse, it's been an honor speaking with you, man. I thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. And it's too bad we're gonna passing ships in the night. We'll miss each other at No Coast, but hopefully we'll be able to meet in person at some point.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I know you're coming up to Boston. Maybe that's close enough to me. Maybe I can make it up.
It'll be a good show. Playing with Sexless Marriage. Yeah, it'll be a good one.
Okay, sounds good, man. Well, then I will make my best efforts to do that.
Cool. Well, hit me up if you end up coming up. Get our people to talk to your people.
Okay, I will have your people to talk to me.
Perfect.
Yeah, man.
Well, thanks again, my man.
Absolutely. Best of luck, buddy.